everybody. Welcome welcome back to Lace's Library, where we read RPG horror stories. Today, it's going to be a bit of a long one because it's a few parts, but it is called Horror Story. The Princess Rules with an Iron Fist and Emotional Manipulation. We were given permission by Chrysalis17 on Reddit. Content warning. This story involves discussion of mental health issues like severe depression, panic attacks, self-harm, and SA-related trauma. It's the 3rd year anniversary of this horror story taking place. I wrote the first version of the horror story a year after it was done and over, hoping it would give me closure. It did help. Now I return to it one more time to edit it, for brevity, and I might even end up posting it. This is going to be an unreasonably long one. I tried to divide this monstrosity into chapters, depending on campaigns, so you should, in theory, be able to read sections about specific campaigns without losing too much context. Here's a short introduction to the most important people of this story. Princess is the main character, who renders this a horror story. She played a Medusa cleric in the first campaign. Prince Consort is Princess's husband. He played a warlock in the first campaign. He would always try to roleplay in a way to avoid Princess getting upset, meaning he would throw his own character's personality to the curb so hers would never make a bad experience ever. Mastermind is the GM of the campaign Princess introduced me to, who would later be a player in Princess's homebrew setting. Summer is another player who joined the campaign at the same point I did. She played a druid. Princess quickly disliked her. Winter is Summer's sibling, and a player in Mastermind's second campaign. Rogue and Barbarian were quiet players in Mastermind's first campaign. Rose is my best friend and roommate who would later join the 2 other campaigns and ultimately all the campaigns. Her relationship to me and the way it could express itself in-game would become another point of conflict for Princess. A not-so-short overview. Princess and I were close friends a few years back. We played TTRPGs together back then, too, before we had a huge falling out that also involved TTRPG differences. I ended up regretting how I behaved back then because I missed her. I matured over the years and felt that I had been pretty childish and had lacked understanding for her. She had been through a lot of emotional hardship and tended to react irrationally or in a hurtful manner because of past trauma. I looked for her online because even if we could not be friends any longer, I wanted to apologize to her, just for my own peace of mind. About 3 years ago, I actually found her via Facebook. I messaged her. We caught up with each other for a little bit, and to my great relief, she accepted my apology. We were friends again pretty soon, and it almost felt as if no time had passed at all, which was bad, since we would eventually fight again, almost the same way we had before, and I would learn that I had not been immature and lacking in understanding. Eventually, her whole scheme collapsed in on itself, and now we are no longer in touch. I learned more than I wanted during the year we were friends again, and I no longer have any regrets about how I treated her, other than having been too accommodating for way too long. While I took quite a few emotional issues with me from the whole ordeal, including a huge relapse into depression and a few legit panic attacks, I also got back into role-playing. I got to be part of a wonderful D&D campaign I am still playing, and I made friends I would not want to miss. So, if taking a deep dive into a horror story about an extremely manipulative and abusive person is your thing, buckle up. This is going to be a long, long ride. Step by step. Odyssey of the Dragon Lords. 1. Pre-campaign knowledge and character creation. While catching up, Princess would often tell me about the D&D campaign she was playing and deeply invested in. She would tell me lots about her character. I soon knew that she was playing a princess who was to be queen, but got cursed to be both turned into a Medusa and forgotten by history. Her storyline would be all about breaking her curse, then finding out who cursed her in the first place, so she could find the enemies within her future kingdom and deal with them. But after some time, Princess started voicing grievances with the campaign, mainly about the other players hardly engaging with her or her character's story. Soon after that, the group started looking for 2 new players. The other new addition to the group would be Summer, a personal friend of Mastermind's, while Princess asked me. Summer picked a spellcasting-focused druid, and since Barbarian played the only melee-focused character, I decided to go melee, as well with Fighter. I offered to tie his backstory to Princess's character, since she felt like nobody engaged with her, and I wanted to do something nice for her. That would turn out to be a huge mistake. The campaign was chock full with larger-than-life, ordained-by-destiny kind of characters, so I decided to go similar in grandeur, but different in role. I went for an anti-hero, the Lancer to Princess's leader, the Zuko to her Yang. Aang. Why did I say Yang? Yang. Aang. Her character and mine knew each other from youth, but they had been rivals, where she had been the popular, intelligent, beautiful princess chosen by a goddess. Mine was the personal charge of the villainous kings who had plotted to marry the 2, since the king didn't want her to rule. Eventually, way after the princess had been cursed and erased from history, my fighter broke free of the king's teachings and fled. He turned into a guilt-ridden, quiet, and sullen type who really wanted redemption but didn't feel like he deserved it. I imagined he'd be accepted because of his much-needed skills on one hand, and because of the princess-turned-Medusa's desperate wish for some connection to her former life, even if it wasn't a good one. I could not have been any more wrong with my prediction. Odyssey of the Dragon Lords 2. She bends and retcons roleplay to her liking. Princess bending everything to her will started small. At first, she just influenced character dynamics and roleplay in the direction she wanted in character. For example, she didn't play her Medusa as having a bad or conflicting opinion of my fighter at all. Instead, she was kind, gentle, and insecure about our monstrous Medusa nature and his presence more than anyone else's. When my fighter revealed a darker part of his backstory, namely having murdered on the king's orders and one of the victims even having been a Medusa, Princess's character had no issue with it, even though it should have played into her internal monster conflict. She immediately forgave him, hugged him, and then had her own emotional breakdown about how harrowing it is to learn what the king had done, and that she now had to fight her own family. We would only notice later how this scene is basically an example how most roleplay scenes would go. Princess would immediately do whatever needed doing to get other people's pain or concerns out of the way, and instead make it about her own character. Next, Princess asked for text roleplay between her and my character. We had done text roleplay before, between the princess and the fighter, back when they were still at court, just so we could feel out the dynamic they had before they would meet again. Princess now wanted to roleplay a scene between our characters between sessions, since we cut at camp. I reluctantly agreed. The text roleplay ended up being nothing but her character whining and needing support and reassurance for an entire evening, including, but not limited, to my character having to help her deal with her self-inflicted wounds. Yes, she self-harmed, by tying ribbons around her arms so tightly that they cut her. This emotional support role wasn't one I wanted my character in. He was not supposed to be cold, but to be out of touch with emotions and fighting his own demons. The way Princess set up that scene, however, made me feel as though I had the option to either toss out how I'd want to play my character in favor of supporting hers, or have my character be an absolutely horrible person. Though, maybe I just didn't have it in me to play my character appropriately in that moment. I don't know. The text roleplay ended with Princess writing out a several paragraph long scene of her character having her personal 5-minute dramatic anime overcoming my darkest moment scene with hair/snakes blowing in the wind, including praying and striking dramatic poses in front of the night sky. Yes, seriously. While my character got to stand in the background and watch. In future sessions, it became very clear that Princess was role-playing toward a romance between our characters. I was surprised, but curious to see where their complicated story would go. My impression was that, in their youth, the two of them had pretty much nothing in common. Consequently, the princess had never been interested, which is why the king's attempt at matchmaking never worked. When my character hinted at that, however, Princess's retconning power activated. The Medusa revealed to him that the true reason they had never been a couple was that she had been a nymph before she had been cursed. And nymphs were known for their enthralling beauty, a feature that would allow them to cast spells such as Charm Person. The princess feared to accidentally make my fighter fall for her with her inherent magic, which was why she never made a move and left all the courting to him. Had he actually made a move on her, they would have been a couple. First and foremost, of course, the feature as written does not support the way she roleplayed it. I guess it was just an excuse for her to portray her princess as suffering from being so incredibly beautiful. It's a common fantasy. She also had to have retconned this excuse in, because my character hadn't been part of the campaign from day one, but her NPC fiancé had been. A fiancé who was, as Princess had told me before, extremely bookish and oblivious to romantic advances. So, the tragically beautiful nymph princess had to more or less shove herself into his face for him to notice. So she was never worried about accidentally charming him, I suppose. But even more importantly, back when my fighter was instructed to win her princess over, she was 15 and he was 19, and their emotional maturity was worlds apart as well. She was a socialite who would party a lot, while he was a soldier. I didn't feel iffy about their age gap, for as long as it was obviously a political maneuver, aiming for a prim and proper engagement that would not be turned into a wedding for years. But with Princess arguing that my character should have been more forward while her character was a minor, I emotionally noped out. And since her engagement with her NPC fiancé, who was of the same age as my character, was made public when she was 18, they were dating while her character was a minor, and she wanted my character to make a move while she was 2. This was both her character's and her own opinion on the matter. The relationship between our characters turned out very different, all in all. It started with willful ignorance of some parts of my character's story and bending others with the aid of retconning. She turned an Aang/Zuko type relationship into a very YA romance with lots of emotional drama with her at the center, and my edgy boy yearning for redemption, constantly fawning over her because he felt guilty instead of brooding in the corner. I certainly expected something different from my character and his role in the campaign, but I, foolishly, decided to roll with it, being a yes-and role player and all. Still, I felt she overstepped and took control of my character's backstory for me. But nothing that couldn't be worked with, right? Right? 2 more campaigns start. Around that time, our group started expanding. Issues with Princess came up in all 3 campaigns. They even started intertwining and bleeding into each other, so it's very difficult to separate them from each other. And as many of the issues started simultaneously and only escalated later on, the red flags only became apparent later on as well. So please don't judge me for joining Princess's homebrew campaign, for example. At that point, we only had minor disagreements with each other, and her breakdown about her character in Mastermind's second campaign had not happened yet. Mastermind's second campaign. 3. She has to have the most special character or just won't have fun. Mastermind started a second campaign. Players in that campaign would be Princess, Rose, my closest friend and roommate, Summer and Winter, Summer's sibling. This time, issues started during character creation, but stretched into the campaign as well. Princess now tried to influence other players' character creation in a way that would benefit her, especially to make her character better or more special by comparison. Princess decided to play a group face with an unconventional class pick, a druid. She wanted to play an environmental activist who sneak into high society events and free the animals kept there in fancy menageries, which is totally fine, or at least up to this point it was. I decided to have a take on the wayward noble kind of character Princess played in the other campaign. I picked an elven prince who had gotten stuck in a pocket dimension long enough for his entire civilization to fall. I wanted for him to be a relic of a long-forgotten age, someone brilliant who was also very arrogant and clinging to his past status even though it didn't hold any meaning anymore. In short, I wanted to balance his most special trait, the nobility, with his worst one, which was a result of the former. And then, Princess wanted her character to use the charlatan background to pretend to be, you guessed it, a princess. I was not thrilled, because other than me being sick of her pretty princesses, I knew having a pretend noble in the group would be a source of conflict, my prince would consider her an imposter. And Princess always asked not to establish any conflict between player characters. So, to accommodate her in that regard, I would have to drop my character's arrogance and entitlement. Princess noticed I wasn't thrilled and offered to change her character's ruse. But when I took her up on the offer, all hell broke loose. I assumed she expected me to decline and say that she could, of course, play a princess again. She wailed how without being a princess, her druid wasn't the character she had envisioned, how it was always her who had to change her characters so others could have what they wanted, how she had wanted to, just this once, play a character without having to make selfless changes for the sake of others. I trust I don't have to point out how she had, so far, been the one to change other people's characters around her, rather than the other way around. In hindsight, her claims are obviously ridiculous, but at that time, I was guilt-ridden, because I felt her misery was my fault, and that meant I had to fix it, whatever it took. It took me putting all my time and energy into trying to make her feel better. I spent 1.5 weeks talking to her about the situation and her character, from whenever I got up to around 6 in the morning, which was when I could collapse back into bed. I also told her she could play her princess and I'd switch characters. She refused, but went on about how her, even having been asked to consider someone else rather than herself for a moment, had to put her in a depressive episode. She didn't even want to play the character anymore, and she would probably just not have fun in that campaign, no matter how we would resolve this conflict. This is, of course, an extreme case of guilt tripping. But we get stupid when we care about people, and I was determined not to let this friendship break for a second time, so I did my damnedest to help her. I even helped her both design her character's outfit and to assemble a description for the artist she wanted to commission. My mental health suffered a lot. I slept very little and worried 24/7 about her. Eventually, I did manage to get her to be excited about the campaign again. That was, until the second character creation related drama began, this time involving Princess and Summer. Princess never talked to Summer about it, and complained to Mastermind and me instead. It all started with Princess complaining that Summer's monk had a 16 wisdom at level 3, which she felt encroached on her own druid's 16 wisdom. She wouldn't hear that her wanting a character's main stat to be the highest stat in that ability in a party was a personal hang-up rather than an official part of the D&D etiquette. At this point, Princess had it out for Summer. She compared their two characters relentlessly, and saw attempts to undercut her own everywhere. Summer described her character turning invisible as becoming one with the shadows. That was way too similar to her Asimar's wildfire druid's wing of smoke. The monk liked animals and had to pet every stray cat. Her druid is supposed to be the animal friend. I had to spend hours after each session trying to convince her that Summer's monk was not a personal attack on Princess. Eventually, she began criticizing Summer in Mastermind's first campaign, too, where Princess's cleric and Summer's druid were both wisdom-based, too. Princess decided that Summer always tried to encroach on her characters. Her favorite argument about this issue was, "I just want to be a little special, too." She argued this while playing. A nymph princess turned Medusa, who had been so beautiful she feared accidentally making people fall in love with her, who was the most brilliant philosopher of her generation, beloved by pretty much everyone but evil people, whose personal mentor had been a goddess, who had been bestowed with divine powers by another goddess, and also was on a personal quest to break her curse and become queen. And 2, an Asimar wildfire druid, who wasn't really a descendant of a celestial, but the avatar of the forest, created by the forest as an advocate against encroaching humanity. Yes, she was the Lorax. And said avatar of the forest, of the wild, one might say, was the party's face, who'd use her beguiling beauty to charm her way into the wealthy people's mansions, and had connections to every important faction in the main city. But she constantly felt she wasn't allowed to be special, read special enough, and felt the 1. Gnome druid on her quest to become archdruid, and the 2. Cursed human monk were stealing her thunder? In some ways, she managed to influence me enough for me to become hyper-aware of every little problem or imperfection in Summer's roleplay. While I fought against Princess's extreme hostility, I became annoyed by some of the things Summer did. That way, Princess managed to alienate me from playing with Summer in the first campaign, and the friendship between her druid and my fighter suffered. which was a success for Princess, I suppose. 3.5. She plots and lies to make herself look good. Much later, after the whole thing imploded in Mastermind, Summer and I started talking about our experiences with Princess. Some of her more dishonest behavior came to light. Princess weaponized her and my fight about her playing another pretend or not princess to make herself look good. Mastermind told us that Winter, a player we didn't know yet, thought about playing a noble as well. Since I relented and told Princess she should play whatever background she wanted, this was a non-issue. Still, Mastermind asked us both not to let Winter know that there had been any concerns in the first place, because Mastermind argued Winter was insecure and might outright leave the party to avoid conflict. We agreed to bury the issue, but Princess went behind our backs and made sure Winter knew. She talked to Summer and told her I was stirring up trouble because I wanted for my character to be the only noble in the group, and how picking a noble might cause issues because I was unreasonable. She kindly warned her. You see, she relied on Summer delivering the message, I suppose, and sure enough, Winter came up with a different character, and both Summer and Winter were apprehensive about playing with me at all. They would later tell me so. Mastermind would also later tell me how Princess complained to her about how me not wanting other nobles in the group was unfair, because I had no issues bringing in another heir to the throne into the first campaign either. This was a gross misstatement. The fact that she put it as though my character joining the first campaign took anything away from her, while I explicitly made sure that my character's story would enrich hers, was truly baffling. I had even run my backstory by her, and assured her that the king wanting my character on the throne was an evil plot, and her character was the illegitimate heir. I assumed she did all this to make sure that she looked good, like someone who cared for everyone, and suffered because of the actions of others. And others having bad opinions about each other was an added bonus to make sure she would always be the most popular. How I came to that conclusion will become a little more clear along the way. Princess's Campaign 4. She micromanages everything to live her personal fantasy. Princess started another campaign in a homebrew setting of hers. She had GM'd a campaign in before. Mastermind would be another player. She also asked Rose and me to join. I was apprehensive, because she had told me bits and pieces of her first campaign, and I really didn't vibe with the kind of story she had created. Most, if not all, of her NPCs had a feel of self-insert GM PC to me, with about 90% of them being insanely pretty and magically gifted dainty ladies of high status, wearing flowing dresses. The plot was free the goddesses / half-goddess princesses from being used for their power by the evil wizard. I doubted the second campaign would be different in a meaningful way, even though she assured me that it would be when I, diplomatically, told her about our differing tastes. And because I didn't want to hurt her feelings by telling her that I didn't want to, I ended up joining her campaign. The problem started during character creation. She would hover over everything and restricted what kind of weapons we were allowed to have, which race or class we could play, and even what we could spend our starting money on, as everything would have to fit her setting, which was her go-to argument for prohibiting everything that didn't appeal to her personal taste. Meaning, for example, while there were huge fantasy machinery in her world, we weren't allowed warforged, artificers, firearms, or even a collapsible rod. She also required all the characters to be heroes, which by her definition meant that moral ambiguity should be kept to a minimum. We should play characters that would help those in need. I understand that some campaigns require characters to be mostly morally white, but Princess would later use this requirement to force us into a specific playstyle that fed into her wish fulfillment. More on that later. She liked my idea of a very flirtatious, hedonistic, and generous bard. Original, I know. But would bend him and his story to her liking from the get-go. She populated the circus he grew up at with 46 additional NPCs, many of which were pretty magic ladies, and completely shifted the vibe I was going for. She was also eager to discuss which of these pretty magic ladies my bard would have been into, and have flings with. She developed a strong interest in a specific pretty magic girl I agreed my bard had a fling with. Princess even wrote a little NSFW scene involving the two. I didn't mind, initially, and found it flattering how into my character she seemed to be. But once I had read it, it was obvious that it wasn't about my character at all, but about how Princess's NPC got everything Princess was into. It was about her fulfillment, which she threw my bard's personality to the curb for. It felt as though my character was a tool for her self-insert desires. Princess's campaign. 5. Potentially romantic interaction between others becomes a trigger. After all our player characters were set and we started joking about character dynamics on our campaign Discord, she voiced concerns about Rose and me, since we talked about our characters in terms of a ship dynamic. She actually argued that we'd turn her campaign into our personal dating sim. And this was the first time I told her how deeply hurt I was that she thought I would treat her campaign that selfishly. She backpedaled enough to make excuses for her behavior, asking me to understand why she needed me to reassure her that I wouldn't do anything that could potentially result in what she was scared of, namely, anything going wrong and the campaign not being fun. When this whole drama, including me reassuring her everything would be fine and she'd be a great DM, was over with, she had the gall to say she had wished the conversation to be about her worries rather than my indignation. She felt as though she had spent most of the time apologizing to and comforting me, rather than me coaxing her fears and worries from her, and trying to comfort her without having her limit who I was allowed to play with. If only this had been the only time Princess tried to throw a wedge between characters. Because Princess was very adamant that she didn't want any inter-group conflict. We tried to feel out character dynamics out beforehand by text role-playing some small non-canon snippets between characters. During one short but amazing interaction, we found out that Mastermind's Genesee and my bard were fun, lighthearted, and flirty together. Soon after, Princess confided in me again. This time, you might have guessed it if you're any better at recognizing patterns than I was. It was about mine and Mastermind's characters. Princess revealed Mastermind's backstory for her heir Genesee to me, and how it was part of a problem she had with the character's relationship to my bard. The story was all about freedom and lack thereof. The Genesee had run away from home with the wrong guy as a teen. She ended up at a circus, where she was unknowingly held prisoner by the man she had considered her closest friend, the circus director. He also used the circus to lure in young women. He transformed them into birds, put them into cages, and feed on their energy. When the Genesee uncovered all that, her friend allowed her to leave. But if she wasn't back after 1 year, he would kill another at the circus. So the Genesee's goal was to live as happy a life as possible for that 1 year, but returning to her friend to make sure he wouldn't kill anyone else. Mastermind's plan was that this story would be revealed to the group by then, and that the group would confront the circus director. Now, Princess's problem was the Genesee's age. She said that Mastermind only made her of age at all, because Princess required her to be 18 at the very least. By now, the Genesee was planned to be somewhat between 21 and 23, but Princess couldn't shake the knowledge that the Genesee had originally been 17 and been through a lot of dark stuff involving men having power over her. I've since learned that Mastermind never planned to play a minor. She had planned for her character to have run away from home when she still had been, but she should then spend a few years at the circus, and by the start of the campaign, she was supposed to be very much an adult. I didn't know that at this point, though. Princess then told me, because she couldn't shake the feeling of Mastermind's character being a minor, that my bard really shouldn't flirt with her, and this was, of course, what it was all really about. I spent several days, again only with breaks for sleeping, talking her through this. She didn't get to treat Mastermind's character like anything she was not, and she couldn't make decisions about her, such as what her character was allowed to do. All of this culminated in Princess ultimately accusing me of being weirdly insistent on flirting with a minor. I suppose her accusation was meant to make me back off immediately, and I did, but I got angry enough at her accusation that she revealed the reason she had issues with any kind of flirty behavior between Mastermind's character, 21 to 23-year-old but feeling like a minor, and mine, 26-year-old. Now, renewed content warning. The following bit involves mentions of SA-related trauma. She revealed to me that she was a survivor of SA. She had been in a circle of friends that was generally past 30 in age, while she was in her late teens, and her boyfriend of the time was around 40. She had felt compelled to go along with their partying, drinking, and sexual behavior. She didn't understand how abusive this situation actually was until years later, because she was being invited to drinks and parties, got lots of compliments, and was praised for being so mature for her age. Of course, I was shaken by what she had told me, and I comforted her. Princess explained to me that this was the reason why she saw Mastermind's character as being the victim of abuse of the same kind, because she had originally been a minor and now changed, as in pretended to be older, to fit in with the crowd, by a way more, actually, mature 26-year-old. Princess would now use her trauma as a thought-terminating cliche whenever she couldn't make any concise argument. The situation just triggered her past trauma, and I want to in no way insinuate that she didn't suffer through what she said she suffered through, but I do question the way she employed her trauma as a reason for why Mastermind's character should not flirt with grown adults, including my character. For example, as I wrote earlier, Princess's nymph Princess had been a high society party gal and had a variety of actual partners before she was engaged, which was made public when she turned 18. My fighter should have made a move on her when she was a minor. All of this did not trigger her, so maybe you can forgive me that I do doubt her sincerity. There was only one thing I insisted on, that it was unfair to Mastermind to prohibit her character from doing something without Mastermind even knowing about it, and without giving her the chance to change her character. Mastermind should know that Princess was deeply uncomfortable with her character, so that Mastermind could, for example, pick another character altogether if she wanted to play a character who would be allowed to be flirty. Princess's suggestions to resolve the matter were different. The romance ban for Mastermind's character would only be about player characters, because Princess would certainly not be triggered if she was involved and in control of the situation. It certainly was very convenient for a princess. She also thought about prohibiting romances between player characters altogether, which seemed hypocritical to me, considering the time and effort she put into a romance between our characters in the other campaign. I got the feeling that Princess would always have reasons, no matter the campaign, to argue for a setup that involved her rather than others in any given romantic plot. That suspicion emboldened me enough to tell her that with a PC romance ban, I'd pick another character to play, because I don't want to play a flirty character who wasn't allowed to flirt with the people he traveled with. That made her back off the idea. Eventually, Princess's use of trauma as an answer to everything got out of hand. Anything my bard would do in relation to the genasi could now potentially be triggering for her, with no way of either me or Princess knowing beforehand. If Princess was involved with the genasi, however, she would be fine. So I assume she would magically not get into a situation that is triggering herself, even if she didn't know her triggers. I think not. Again, I argued I should just play another character. I didn't feel comfortable playing a character that could be potentially triggering for her without her being able to narrow it down at all. She explicitly said, it doesn't have to be anything sexual. And again, she backed off immediately. I cannot stress enough that I didn't threaten her, but I would not want Princess or me to be constantly stressed out and walking on eggshells. I would pick a character who is ace, for example, or in a monogamous relationship from the start. But suddenly, Princess bent over backwards to explain to me how much she loved my bard. She even wailed about how she shouldn't have told me anything about her trauma. She should just have suffered quietly, and so on and so forth. She seemed more distressed with the situation now than when she talked about her trauma, so against my better judgment, I gave in and stuck with the bard. This is the promise we ended agreeing on, in which I had to come up with, because Princess needed to be walked through her emotions into a solution more often than not. My bard would not romance Mastermind's character. He would only flirt with her, because it was his general way of engaging with most people. Princess would watch the dynamic between the characters unfold, and would see if she would become more comfortable with it. She would give Mastermind a chance to roleplay her character as a grown woman. Maybe her anxiety would dwindle away, and eventually she would even lift the romance embargo. So, another few days and nights well spent to help a friend of mine work through her emotional trauma, right? Well, I later learned that Princess told Mastermind that Princess primarily comforted me, even though I texted her day and night to help her to calm down and to stop breaking down about problems she created herself, since she wouldn't allow either Mastermind or me to just change characters. Renewed content warning. This story involves discussion of severe mental health issues and SA-related trauma. Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, 6. Who doesn't do as she wants does not care for her. Princess started shaping the way I would play my fighter to a ridiculous degree by guilting me into changing my behavior. It started by her commenting that my character's drama took away from others, especially hers. She felt like I had created a character who wallowed in his struggles rather than overcoming them. I didn't agree and felt she took up way more space and time than me, but I still felt insecure about how I had roleplayed my fighter up to that point, like I had been hogging the spotlight. I also felt bad about the amounts of trauma I had piled onto him, which wasn't little, even though he was a happy camper compared to Princess's Medusa. Be that as it may, from that point on, I reined my character's issues in significantly. I also stopped engaging in roleplay with anyone else in the group, because Princess would initiate so many scenes between her character and mine that I felt doing anything more would take away time others deserved. This effectively locked me into roleplaying with nobody but Princess. Then, Princess guilt-tripped me into text roleplay with her by suggesting we could deal with my character's issues by giving him therapy. Of course, her Medusa would be his therapist. I didn't like text roleplay because I didn't want character development to happen without the rest of the group. But her saying I wanted to have an audience for my roleplay and there just being no time to give my character the therapy he desperately needed during D&D did the trick. I decided to take the therapy as an excuse to develop my character past the parts of his pathology that, according to Princess, made him so difficult. I agreed to try out the text roleplay, but if I got the impression that too much character development was happening off-screen, I wanted to stop again. Princess agreed. The therapy sessions weren't exactly fun, because of course, Princess managed to make them about her character. She needed to be comforted since she hadn't managed to stop my fighter from killing in the king's name, rather than helping him overcome his own guilt. The Medusa, just like Princess, needed a lot of coddling. Eventually, the exact thing I didn't want had happened. Too much background was revealed during text roleplay, up to the point that the Medusa made my fighter drop the alias he had used without the rest of the group even knowing what said alias was about. When I wanted to stop text roleplay, all hell broke loose. Suddenly, she didn't know anything about this being a trial. She said the only chance at playing her character was taken from her, as she had never had the time or the space during regular D&D. She also claimed that this was, again, a case in which she had to put her wants and needs last, because I insisted on fulfilling mine. Another instance of her being inconsolable for days on end with me trying to explain myself and comfort her followed. Sleepless nights, worries, declining health, the whole shebang, because she didn't get to roleplay her character's drama outside our weekly D&D. The drama was followed seamlessly by escalations in our own campaign, which meant I went from talking to her day and night because of one thing to talking to her day and night because of the next. This was my first real breaking point. Princess's Campaign, 7. Divide and Conquer fails because of panic attack. The drama around Mastermind's Genasi, my bard, and Princess's triggers intensified. During her campaign, Princess had complaints about Mastermind's character, which were curiously opposite to her initial worries. Princess felt like Mastermind's Genasi was harassing others, be it her hugging Rose's grumpy paladin who pretended not to like it, while Rose herself assured Princess that it was fine, or the Genasi hugging my bard when he had a very emotional moment, which Princess stated was reinforcing a harmful stereotype of hugging someone out of a panic attack, even though I told her he wasn't having a panic attack. My fighter was when her Medusa hugged him back in the day, though. It seemed to me like Mastermind could do no right with her character. One night, Masterminds and my character shared a bed in an inn. They just cuddled. They were friends. Still, Princess asked me not to do anything like that again. She said she was disappointed in me, since I knew about her trauma. Suddenly, romantic intention didn't matter anymore. Them being close at all was a no-go. This was the point where I had the first of 2 mental health breakdowns. For months, I had prioritized Princess's feelings without question, and I tried to comfort her whenever she voiced being anything less than happy, which meant close to always, and now I noticed that I had no energy left. We had been talking through her disappointment with stopping text roleplay before D&D, and now we were discussing Mastermind's character and mine again. And Princess, yet again, demanded for me to behave differently to accommodate her. And this time, I didn't have the energy required to talk Princess through all of this. The fear set in, because I knew if I couldn't give her what she needed, our friendship would be in danger, because it was her way or the highway. Because whenever she didn't get what she needed, she argued people didn't care about her. So then and there, I had a panic attack. I froze up. My heart started racing. Everything. Princess had little to no understanding for my situation. I tried to tell her I needed a break, but she voiced her disappointment in me. She always tried to be there for me, after all, so why couldn't I? It took me telling her word for word that I was having a panic attack and that I was going to lie down. This bitch. Excuse my language. This bitch. I just need to put something here. She always tried to be there for me. Yeah, right. I wish my PNG tuber could actually see my expressions, because right now I just want to, get in a fight. As this, not fawning over her, was pretty atypical behavior for me, she changed her tune immediately and asked if we could just talk about something else that didn't bother me that much. I left for bed anyway. I didn't sleep for hours, but I had to remove myself from the situation. I was completely preoccupied with the fear of losing my friendship with Princess, and me having to cut ties with everyone in the 3 D&D campaigns, and being alone again. This, coincidentally, is a kind of trauma I carry around with me. I hardly did anything for maybe 2 days, and had it not been for Rose putting plates of food in front of me whenever she came home from work, I might not have eaten either. I'm not writing this down to get sympathy, but to emphasize how serious the situation had to get for me to start changing my behavior towards Princess and for Rose to put her foot down. In a lucky moment, Mastermind was frustrated enough with the situation in Princess's campaign to let some of that shine through in a message to me. And, for the first time, we had an exchange about it. It turned out that Mastermind wasn't in the loop about many of the issues Princess had voiced about Mastermind's character. That's not surprising. She didn't know Princess hated Mastermind's character hugging other group members. I don't think it's other group members. I think it's specifically OP. Or that Princess had thought about prohibiting PC romances. Mastermind was furious. Additionally, Rose put her foot down about my mental health. She asked me not to accommodate Princess the way I had until then, and she let Mastermind know about the state I was in, as Mastermind and I weren't really close enough for me to confide in her. Mastermind, being her idealistic self, took it upon herself to talk to Princess about it, since I didn't feel up to the task. I would later learn that Mastermind telling Princess about how badly I was doing, and how much the situation stressed me out, made her reply, "I'm not doing well either, you know." Mastermind suggested that Princess, Mastermind, and me should talk together, as the issue involved the 3 of us. Princess was shocked. She treated Mastermind and I talking about the issue as a breach of confidence. This time, I didn't let her guilt trip me. As long as I didn't tell anyone anything sensitive, I did nothing wrong. Luckily, Princess couldn't argue the opposite. Eventually, we did have a talk via Discord, for which Prince Consort had to be present as both Princess's emotional support and her translator, since she had fits of crying through most of the talk. That is guilt-tripping. Mastermind and I stated we'd not walk on eggshells with our characters anymore, waiting for anything to trigger Princess and her new restrictions to be added to her interactions. We also didn't want to be responsible for the misery she was going through, so we wanted to either leave the campaign or pick new characters. Even mentioning that sent Princess into renewed fits of crying, she instead unreasonably requested for Bard and Genasi to just avoid each other completely. Which, how? They're in a group. So I don't understand this jealousy. And the thing is, her husband is right behind her. Literally, he said that he backed her up. Like, So, Princess ended up pretending to be a martyr about it because Mastermind's character just triggers her, and she refused any reasonable way to deal with the situation. Princess demanded that Mastermind talk to her about her character in between sessions to help Princess understand the character better, arguing that it might help not being on edge as much. Mastermind agreed. That was no. I don't understand why she wants them to be the same character if she's just gonna sit there and complain about it. And then, I'm annoyed with Princess. We plan to watch the situation for the next few sessions like this, with brief feedback about her and our feelings, before we'd ultimately decide if we'd get to play our characters unabridged, or if we'd drop them altogether. Neither Mastermind nor I felt good about the situation. We felt we were keeping an unhealthy situation going against better judgment, and we were. Princess's Campaign 8. The triggered abuse survivor likes stories about abuse. Now with this, we get to the nuclear strike session in Princess's Campaign. The session in which Princess proved that she put no effort into understanding anyone and didn't afford anyone the same attention or care she did herself. After this, Mastermind left the campaign. The plot of the session goeth thusly. The daughter and the husband of a fairy queen ask the group for help. The fairy has locked herself into the task of reviving a dead forest, but she remains dissatisfied and starts over, because her family had tried to get her out of it, her rut. She sealed the forest to make sure they cannot enter. Now, her family asks the group to overwhelm the fairy queen in her lair and trap her in a magic gem, which is then to be returned to her family. I don't know if I have to add the sentence, "My father knows what's best for her," which the fairy queen's daughter used, to make it any clearer how this looks like a story about the heroes returning a woman to a husband against her will, with the use of force, even. The session derailed immediately. Most players were uncomfortable, most of all Mastermind, whose genasi was all about freedom and autonomy. Princess pretended in a hurry that she hadn't expected the group to go through with it, which was a planned lie since the quest was also a requirement for the party's warlock, given by his patron. Then, she softened the quest enough so we only had to persuade the fairy to drop her protective spell and to return to her family willingly, which is only a minor improvement. To top it all off, Mastermind's character wasn't allowed to be comforted by my bard because, say it with me kids, it was triggering to Princess. We finished the quest as quickly as possible, and the session ended awkwardly. Afterwards, Mastermind and Princess talked, because Princess didn't understand why this kind of plot was such a problem for Mastermind's character, which, again, was baffling to Mastermind, as they talked a lot about her genasi as per Princess's request, and Princess had taken issue with the genasi story before. Reminder, imprisonment at home, imprisonment at the circus, and a man who holds women against their will. So, Princess saw an abuse victim in Mastermind's character because of her backstory, but she wouldn't see why Mastermind's character would have issues with a storyline that involved taking a woman to a man against her will. Princess was offended that Mastermind wouldn't give her the benefit of the doubt and trust that she wouldn't do anything to hurt her, which is an argument I would very gladly have repeated to her. This was when Mastermind decided to leave the campaign, because she was now convinced that Princess didn't make an honest effort to interact with her character, and that Princess demanded a degree of benevolence when judging her actions that she never awarded to either of us. 9. She can only be friends with those who constantly prioritize her feelings. I had not talked to Princess about that problematic quest she came up with. I agreed and sympathized with Mastermind, and I knew that Princess wanted and needed someone to comfort her, which I couldn't do. I knew that she was not doing great during all of this, so I refrained from giving her my actual opinion, because I felt like I was kicking her while she was down, so I ended up not texting her at all. Princess promptly accused me, passive-aggressively, about not talking to her. My second mental breakdown came, but this time I clawed my way out of it, was honest with Princess, even though I was scared of the consequences. I finally ended up fessing up to her about what was going on with me, how I panicked because I feared for our friendship if I couldn't give her consideration, attention, and comfort, all time, anytime. And since I was drained, I ended up freezing with fear. I had been through something similar before and lost many friends. I had a couple miserable and lonely years because of it. My depression intensified a lot during that time, and the current situation had it flaring up again. I had never been this open to Princess about my mental health before, but I was moderately sure she'd respond well to it, since she argued in favor of her own mental health so frequently. Unfortunately, I was wrong. I'm not surprised. She was very much unable to see how much time and effort and energy I had already put into maintaining our friendship. The highlight of that conversation was her sentence, "Do you think that, at some point, I'll be able to get anything out of this friendship, too?" Are you serious right now? Excuse my language for the third time. Bitch! This bitch is a bitch. A bitchy bitch. I hope to God YouTube does not care about that, because to top it all off, she decided that if she was to accept that I had panic attacks for fear of losing her and everyone I got to know because of her, I was to not talk to Mastermind or any other person I knew because of her, unless I was also talking to her at the same time. Because me talking to people she knew was triggering to her. Drumroll, I denied her request. I absolutely believe that the thought of not being involved in others talking, potentially even about her, is unbearable for her. It would be unbearable for me, too, if I lied and manipulated regularly to get my way. I don't think anyone should be allowed to control who their friends are in touch with. All of this turned into the reddest of red flags. When she returned, she would have to question our friendship over this, because, she argued, if I couldn't even have enough consideration for her to avoid behavior that would trigger her anxiety, would she really want to be friends with me? Considering I had only just told her that the fear of losing our friendship sent me into a downward spiral, and she now threatened me with ending the friendship for the first time, something finally changed. I'd say I found a backbone, but it's more about her demanding something I recognized as abusive, and I stood my ground. I started quietly questioning our friendship myself after this, and during the next few weeks, the thought of her losing her became less and less scary. I told Mastermind about this. While I didn't want to strain their friendship, I didn't feel comfortable not telling Mastermind that Princess had tried to restrict contact between us, and this made it very clear that I didn't have to worry about being cut out of everyone's lives if Princess were to cut ties with me. On the contrary, at this stage, Mastermind and I had bonded over our shared drama in Princess's campaign enough that we were closer to each other than Mastermind and Princess had ever been. Odyssey of the Dragon Lords. 10. Her own arguments are a foreign language to her. There was another incident that had been more or less foreshadowed earlier. Cliff Notes. When my fighter revealed what he had done at the King's order, the moment ended up not being about him, because Princess's Medusa immediately forgave him, and then spent a considerable amount of time being in tears about the fact that this meant she had to fight the king now, because he was evil, because she was conflicted about it, because he was her uncle. Now, long after that, we learned that an evil mirror image version of my fighter had been created and was now at court. The group never found out how my character reacted to this, because Princess's Medusa immediately broke down in tears. There were so many people in that city she held dear, after all. They were all in danger now. She had to be comforted for at least the very least half an hour, real time, before we could go on with the plot. This was a general behavior of hers. Princess tended to prompt roleplay with her character in one way only. Her Medusa broke down in tears, and others had to support her. Suspiciously close to how she went about things in real life, one might say. She struggled with her identity as a monster. She struggled with her curse. She struggled with her destiny become queen. She struggled with her fiancé not remembering her, and so on and so forth. She had an eerie talent to make every potential topic about her character, and to have her character have an emotional breakdown about them. She declared the most recent quest we had been on to be hers, even though it had been given to the group at large, and she considered it a personal one because the antagonist was a nymph, like her before her curse. Instead, nymph had a sister, like she did. It started to wear the group down, and while Princess managed to make especially Prince Consort and me interact with her character's breakdowns most of the time, I noticed how the mood among the players got worse, and how most of them became silent or impatient. Mastermind, who I talk to more frequently by now, noticed the same. We agreed that this was a vicious cycle, because Princess would build up these moments in which she called for support, but the players were so tired of it that they wouldn't react, which in turn would make her prompt these moments more often because she didn't get what she wanted. Then came another display of this behavior, the icing on the cake, when the group learned that the nymph we needed to stop and had cursed several people to turn into monsters and fight for her. The Medusa demanded we use non-lethal means of dealing with all of them. This was confusing to us, as we had already established that before. We had even inquired about a way of reversing the curse, but when we replied we'd do our best, Princess did not stop. She got very emotional, completely unprompted, about how we couldn't call ourselves heroes if we couldn't even save the people in the nymph's lair. She pretended we weren't on board with the non-lethal approach and pushed us into the role of people who didn't care about the victims, while she did. The mood in the group got downright hostile, and one after the other, the characters left to enter the lair, leaving Princess's Medusa and Prince Consort's Warlock behind. During our post-session feedback, everyone but Princess and Prince Consort mentioned how they did not like that scene, how they felt pushed into a villainous role, and how they were uncomfortable with the excess of crying from the Medusa side. Lo and behold, Princess started crying during feedback. Because she only wanted to play with her character's background for a change. It happened so rarely, after all. While Prince Consort immediately took her side to support her, she didn't understand that there wasn't much of a both sides argument to be had if 4 players and a GM had the same opinion about a given scene. So, what did I do? I engaged in another days-long drama discussion with her. This time, however, I tried to control the terms. I set time frames that didn't stretch until 6 in the morning. I initiated it and knew what I was getting into, and I didn't do it to comfort Princess, but because I tried to fix the mood in the group. I thought the group might potentially break apart because nobody dared to talk to her, so I dared. I was constructive about it. I phrased my actual argument a little more nicely, then I'll summarize it here for brevity. I explained how the amount of attention she demanded wasn't in proportion to the attention anyone else got, that she delayed our plot, that she shifted focus away from other character storylines, or worse, took them over. And I explained to her why other players, including me, tired of her character's behavior, how it felt like everything was upsetting to her, and that no amount of comfort or support given to her would ever help, because Prince Consort's Warlock and my fighter had tried relentlessly, but the Medusa broke down in tears as often, or even more often, than before. She needed her hand held through everything, and with the next opportunity of drama, she would take it and toss any former development to the curb so she could be coddled again. Her reaction, in short, was complete denial. This was just the kind of character she had come up with. If she wasn't allowed to need support, her Medusa just wouldn't be herself anymore. I told her that if her character had to cry once every session and subsequently demand support to even be able to carry on, she had come up with a character that was inappropriate for D&D. A general consideration for other players and the GM is necessary. I even came up with examples of conversation prompts she could use that would characterize her Medusa as someone struggling with the responsibilities thrust upon her without her being entirely passive, crying, and demanding to be comforted before anything constructive could be done. Her reply? She didn't think about her character in those terms. She just played her character the way she was, no matter the people or circumstance. I was dumbfounded that she would argue something like that, after she demanded Mastermind and I change our character's behavior for months in our own campaign. Knowing that pointing it out would end up in a fight, I just ended the conversation, stating that I could only give advice and that I thought she would, in the long term, end up being happier trying to make her character a little more proactive than she was now. She did not do so, and our relationship was even more strained than before. Luckily, ever since her attempt to keep me from talking to Mastermind, I got closer and closer to just accepting it. Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, 11. Grand finale. Why would she respect another person's needs if hers were different? The final straw that broke the camel's back was ridiculously small, but her behavior during the whole ordeal was so plain awful that I decided to end our friendship for good. The group convened to try and define future steps, and an argument from a few sessions earlier resurfaced. Summer's druid had learned that her teacher had fallen ill, and there was reason to suspect an attempt at his life, because he was the guardian of an important portal. Oh my goodness. Why was that like a tongue twister for me? And Princess Medusa had argued before that there just wasn't enough time to go help the old druid. There was too much the group had to do. She received a lot of backlash back then. This time, it wasn't her who argued this, but Prince Consort's warlock. I suspect that Princess talked him into it. Luckily, he was easily convinced that saving the druid, and thus the portal, was absolutely part of the larger picture. We decided to go see the old druid before returning to court to deal with my fighter's mirror image. The session ended peacefully. Unfortunately, Princess wasn't done with the topic. She brought it up again when we texted. I had absolutely no motivation to argue about this. The decision had been made, so no opinion on if we should or shouldn't would have any impact. I told Princess, but she wouldn't relent. She only wanted for me to understand her opinion on the topic, and recounted it in detail. I tried to tell her, duly noted, I have nothing to say to this, but she ended up pulling me into the conversation again and again. Don't you agree? No. Why not? And, of course, I ended up explaining it. I tried to be concise. I tried not to get roped into a full-on argument, and I tried to tell her that I didn't want to talk about it, as the topic made me angry, and I didn't agree with her. Sensing her being stressed out, I even told her that it didn't matter. Disagreeing wasn't a problem, because it wouldn't change the outcome at all. I tried to assure her that I had a forgive and forget kind of attitude about the topic. She could just let it go, and I would as well. But she didn't. She kept talking about this topic for more than 2 hours, even though I asked her to stop. Finally, I put my foot down and told her this wasn't okay, that I was shaken by the fact that she ignored the boundaries I had just given. Even then, she tried to argue how she just wanted to talk to a friend, but I shut her down. I even suggested she should apologize for ignoring my boundaries. She then was sorry we talked about this, which of course wasn't the point. I wanted her to apologize for prioritizing her wishes over my explicit boundaries. Still, I let it go, but I told her to leave me be for the moment, as I was pretty angry and would need a moment to calm down. She took this to understand that she had to wait with talking to me until I talked to her, and so it was a week later until we texted again. I tried to talk to her about something lighthearted, no drama, but she refused, insisting we should talk about what had happened. I was confused, but agreed to hear her out, and she began explaining her opinion on the whole old druid side quest issue. Again, I tried to stop her, but she refused to let it go, always arguing that I didn't understand. I got the feeling that, for as long as I didn't agree with her, she would say I didn't understand. I tried, again, to get her to let it go. And again, I warned her that talking about this was against my specific wishes. I was tired of arguing, especially about D&D non-issues. Still, it went on for hours. Again, she would not let it go, and continued to explain her views on the matter. I tried to at least draw the conversation to why this mattered to her so much, but I couldn't get her to do any more introspection other than, I just want you to listen to me and to understand me. But whenever I answered that I disagreed, she would just go on for another cycle. Eventually, I got so desperate and angry that I stopped her and told her that I couldn't stand the way she behaved. I told her I was exhausted. I didn't want to talk about this. I even told her she didn't need to fear that I thought less of her just because we disagreed. But she kept trying to pressure me into talking to her about this. But what about my needs? Ignoring completely that she had just pushed her needs on me for hours, and the only need of hers that wasn't met was me agreeing with her, which I just plain couldn't do. She argued since she was feeling bad with the situation as it was. We should talk about it, no matter my wishes. In a friendship, she didn't want to carry around bad feelings while remaining unresponsive to me, telling her that she was walking all over mine for the sake of hers. Even when I told her that this meant, in no uncertain terms, that she demanded for her feelings to be prioritized over mine, she didn't budge. I think she didn't even understand. Hours into the conversation, I gave up. I didn't get through to her. I told her this, and I told her that this was the reason why I'd be stopping and going to bed. One last time, she tried to keep me in the conversation by telling me she was in a downward spiral. I did not budge. This was the point where she told me she didn't want to be friends with me any longer. I replied, okay. A few minutes later, she suggested we should talk again when both of us had gotten some sleep. I had just gotten my fill of trying to explain the concept of mutual consideration of feelings and boundaries to her, and since threatening love deprivation only to reach out if it doesn't work is textbook abusive behavior, I declined her. 12. Epilogue. Dividing up the campaigns. We only texted a few more times after that. I informed her that I'd be leaving her campaign for good. I offered for both of us to remain in the other two campaigns and said that, as adults, we should manage to be civil with each other without being in touch personally. Besides, I knew that Mastermind wouldn't take Princess's side, so if we couldn't both remain, Princess would have to go. And I knew how important her Medusa was to her. I didn't want for her to have to give it up. She ended up leaving both of the campaigns. Anyway, but not without contacting Mastermind first. Princess tried to pour her heart out to Mastermind, to make her feel sorry for her, and to win her over against me. Mastermind stood with me. She even gave Princess some advice on how to handle the situation in the group should she decide to stay, but she didn't. And now, for the happy end. After Princess had left the campaigns she had been a player in, things improved significantly in both of them, especially in the first one. It was a revelation. Suddenly, Rogue and Barbarian, our two quiet players, started coming out of their shells more. Especially Rogue started becoming the designated comic relief of the campaign. And after Rose joined to make up for the missing face, Prince Consort's Warlock, and support Princess's Medusa, the whole vibe of the group changed. It was no longer about tragically suffering our way from plot point to plot point with our leader collapsing at every opportunity, but instead, we were optimistic and proactive. And after Princess originally twisted my character to fit her needs as a love interest for her protagonist, with her gone, he got the chance to actually grow. He became the leader of the group, even. I had never expected for his character's story to go this way, but it's very interesting. In conclusion, Princess ruled us with an iron fist for a good, long while. She just covered said fist in a lots of flowers, progressive language, and pleas for emotional support. If her wants and needs weren't met to the letter, she was devastated, which meant she tried to manipulate and guilt people into doing what she wanted, pretended to be advocating for someone else, or admitted to worries and fears in secret to the same avail. She used her own past trauma as excuse for her irrational behavior, but only whenever she liked the outcome she could argue for. And when people inevitably found out about that, she had the gall to be hurt by the fact that people were talking behind her back. She needed to be in the center of all her contacts, needed to be able to control who thought about what about whom, and had to make sure she was the one people would confide in first. Because she had painted this image of being both kind and caring, as well as suffering, all saint-like, of herself. I absolutely believe that she got triggered during all of this drama, but I believe it has less to do with her being a survivor of SA, which I don't question for a second, and more with her being afraid whenever she saw people having fun without her. She had different explanations and triggers in every case, but the outcome was always the same. She tried to stop people from interacting with each other in the favor of interacting with her, be it her jealousy of Summer's druid, calling for Roses and my character to not be too close, or her being triggered by the thought of romantic intentions between Mastermind's character and mine, and later by them being platonically close. She wanted to be the one who was liked the best. She wanted to be in control, whenever she was not, yet she was unhappy, uncomfortable, worried, fearful, and yes, triggered. It was impossible to reason with her, and she decided that, since people weren't doing exactly as she demanded and providing all the attention and consideration she needed without her having to compromise even once, They weren't real friends. Anytime she didn't get exactly what she wanted, she presumed this was because people didn't care about her, or even wanted to hurt her. I have to admit that I still think about her a lot. This is why I wrote this piece. I sometimes think about reaching out to her, or to her husband. I also think about if she might come across this horror story somewhere. She undeniably had a huge impact on my life. A lot of it was negative, but I still care about her very deeply, and knowing that she's probably not doing well right now because she does not get out of her own rut, doing the same shit over and over again, makes me sad. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe she got help. Maybe she's doing better emotionally, and her mental health, and thus her behavior towards the people close to her, got better. I can hope. Okay, so this horror story was a bit of a long one, and I think most of what they said at the end is all stuff I definitely agree with. There are parts where I do believe that a lot of this was just her wanting control. She felt like she needed to have control of every single person in her life, and to do that, she had to be a victim, and that's not right at all, obviously. But I do agree with the last few parts that OP had left. And I don't know if I really have much to add to it, because they seem to have said everything that needed to be said about Princess. So I am gonna let you go, but I hope you enjoyed this RPG horror story. There's gonna be more coming, obviously. So if you do enjoy RPG horror stories, or possibly Call of Cthulhu or Sinking City, then maybe you should join, subscribe, and comment down below if there's anything you would like me to do video-wise that you think would be interesting, like a certain game or a certain horror story that you may have or your friend may have. I just need to have permission from the original poster. Just let me know down in the comments. Okay. Have a fantastical day. Bye.